Welcome to Frankenstein's Fabrics Maths Method Tips and Techniques. This month I'm going to show you how to draft up a block on the larger size graph paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start you off with a block that's got a couple of things in it because I want to show you basically how easy it is. But this block here, so it is actually a 4-patch. So a single square, 2 half square triangles, and a block that has 3 pieces in it. Now I wanted to show you this one because it's fairly straightforward in terms of the construction. Triangles will give you a bit of maths, so the equations for half square triangles and things like that. But what it will show you too is block rotation and the idea of why I like to colour things in. So it will give you an overall view of that. And with this block also, it creates negative space depending on your rotation, and if you're making a whole quilt out of one block, or if you're going to interchange it with other blocks, you'll end up with secondary patterns and things like that. So I'm just going to set up the camera so you can see the graph pad and we'll get started. Okay, so this week what you're going to need is your coloured pencils, ruler, eraser and pencil, your 10mm graph pad, and if you take it further, your tracing pad. So that's an optional extra, that one, so don't worry too much. So the reason why we're using the 10mm is because it's double the size of the 5mm that we used last month to draft all of our shopping list and our cutting list. Now the block I showed you is a 4-patch, so you could go in and draw as a 4-patch, but it is still quite tiny. So in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to double it. So what I want is my 8 and draw a line. I also want it square, so 8 down, and we fix our bottom, and then we draw across the center in both directions. So this is our block. We know that this square here is white. Now if you need to write yourself notes down the side, you can, so you just write white. We know that this will be a half square triangle, as will this one be, and this is our 3-piece. So if you wanted to do it that way, you can. We're not working on any maths at this stage, except for the ratio of our squares. So we draw our 2 half square triangles, and we know that there's white and we know that there's colour. So at the moment we sort of can see what's happening. Now with our last one, it's a 3-piece, and we know that there's a large rectangle on the inside and the small corner piece is a different coloured fabric to this one. So we now have our block. Now at this stage you can bring in your pencils if you choose. If not, I highly recommend trying colouring in. Now you don't have to colour them in perfectly because we just want a rough idea of where the colour is going at this point. Now if you were going to use your graph paper to draft the entire quilt, this size is too big. You won't get very much in unless you're doing a 1-to-1 ratio. So keep that in mind. That's why I've gotten both of the graph pads there for you. Okay, so there we have our 2 colours, our pink inner and our pointy section here. Now, if you want to do the block and see it as a full rotation, so that means 360 degrees and you're turning the block each time you go, draw another 8 and draw them I'm drawing off to the side because I'm going to draw something else in a moment, but I wanted to show you this. So draw your 8 again. Now, you need to draw every second row. So your 8 divided into your 4 columns in both directions. Now, my lines are a bit wonky because I'm trying not to put my head into the view of the camera, so I apologise if my ruler's a bit off. So as you can see here now, we've got enough to do 4 of these blocks. I want to move it so that this stays in the centre. So these are all white, which means this section here will end up in each corner. So I know then that I can draw a line horizontally in each of the 4 corners and then vertically in the outside rectangle. Okay, now I need to go in and create my half square triangle pieces with my diagonal line. So this block here is this one here. So I create it this way. Now because I've rotated, it means that my half square triangles are now flipped this way. Flipped again. And now you can start to see the secondary pattern coming out. And we have our star. So now, I've changed colour because that pencil broke. So, yeah, this one's broken too. Let's go back. We'll do orange this time. So you can now colour in, and you don't have to colour them in, it's not a competition, you don't have to stay in the lines. It's to give you an idea of colour so that when you go to do your cutting and your measuring and your shopping, you can see exactly what you're looking for, have a sense of how it's going to look without having to overthink it, you know, that sort of thing. So colour in all of your main colour. White can stay blank, and then just go in and do the little bit on each edge. These are probably not the best pencils for this paper, but whatever. So our pink corners. And now you can start to see how this block would look over an entire quilt if you were to repeat it like this. Now, in terms of creating secondary patterns, we have this negative space where the white is, and I will talk about that later, but it is creating this star effect. So if you were to come along and draw another 8 right next to this section here that we've just done, basically the exact same method we've done, you'll start to see that other secondary patterns are starting to appear. So repeat everything that I did before, and see how you go with creating the entire quilt if you want to draft it up, but draft it up maybe with a 1-to-1 ratio because this one here, so 16, 17, 18, there's only 19 squares across. So you'd have to be careful about your measurements there and go from there and just create your ratio that way. So now you can start to see what's happening. We now have a secondary pattern happening here where the pinks are joining. We have a secondary pattern in the center where the whites are joining. And our orange stars are becoming like giant X's. So it's almost like noughts and crosses if you want to start thinking about it that way. So you can see secondary and even tertiary patterns starting to appear, and it's all happening just because you've changed the rotation of one simple block. Now this is true for pretty much every block you'll ever make with quilting. The only thing I would say doesn't really do that is if you're doing things like applique text and stuff like that, but generally pieced blocks will give you these secondary patterns. Now if we were to repeat this whole section again, we would then get another pattern here with an orange star block with a pink center. So I'll just draw those so you can see. So we come down, I'm just going to come down the 4 blocks that it would take, and you'll start to see so I'm just repeating a half section in the center. Now, the beauty of doing colouring in on graph paper means you can, if you wanted to photocopy it before you drew it, before you coloured it in, sorry, you'd be able to get lots. You could colour in as many times as you want. So here is the next pattern. That's a possible repeat from what we've created. And that is one block, just rotating it. So we have one with the negative spaces, a secondary pattern happening in the center when we join those. Because of the color choices you may make, you may be able to see these X's more vividly or less vividly depending on what you're doing. And then we have another pattern repeat happening when the rows are joined. So think about blocks that you've done before and see what you can come up with. But try the ratio of the 1-to-1. So if you look at what I've got here, these squares were 2.5 inches. So this worked out at 4.5 inch square. So this, with the seam allowance, that will come down to a 2-inch block. So have a play with your ratios. I mean, you could count that as a 4-inch block if you wanted to, whatever maths works for you, and go from there. But have a play with this, because it will give you a much better understanding of how blocks can go together, and the rotation is a big thing. Now, the 2 more points that I need to talk about before we go. Negative space. So the negative space here is what when I originally designed this block, the whole reason why I designed the block, because I wanted to quilt on that quilt with negative space and fill it. So all the white on that quilt has been stitched with a very pale teal thread, and it's densely quilted it so it stands out. So Negative space is a thing, but you need to plan ahead. And this is where the second part of what I want to talk to you about comes in. Back to our leaf paper. It's translucent, so you can see through onto your graph paper. So you could line it up and you could start drawing on here that you wanted to do, let's say a heart motif. But then you go, oh, I don't want it there. So you could move it, you could rotate it. And this is the beauty of this translucent paper. You can plot and plan your quilting ahead of time. Rough sketches, you don't have to be perfect. And then you can go in, or you could do the whole thing. Draw out the whole quilting design on this and then shift it around a bit and see if it's what you want it to be. You can use it on this block as well. So you could go in and say, well, I want to do my orange peel corners, dot to dot, but I don't know if I want that there. Maybe I want to do it in some way that makes this block a repeat of these, and you could fiddle around with it. So if you don't have a tracing leaf tracing pad available yet, all the links are in the comments below of the two graph pads and the tracing pad that I bought from Officeworks, so you know which ones they are. If you've got questions, please let me know, but I hope this method of drawing and the colouring in and everything helps you just start to design your own quilt blocks. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and I will see you next month for more methods, maths, tips and techniques. And I don't think I'm ever going to get that in the right order. But thank you for watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out, and the little bell notification so it'll let you know when I've posted more videos. Thanks for watching. Bye.